We're in Comitancillo. At least 3,000 people, probably more, have arrived here. They're basically here to pay tribute to 13 migrants from the town. These migrants left here 2 months ago to the day in search of the American dream, and right now they're returning, but in caskets.
Era necesario que estos jóvenes y señoritas llegaran a su natal pueblo, Santa Cruz, Comitancillo. Un rinconcito perdido en el mapa de Guatemala, de gente humilde, de gente pobre, de gente trabajadora.
A bombshell in Mexico, the killing and burning of 19 people, among them Guatemalan migrants, was perpetrated by police.
Las camionetas quedaron calcinadas. Dentro prendieron fuego a 19 personas. 13 de ellas eran guatemaltecos.
Las autoridades están investigando si agentes de inmigración pudieron estar ligados a la masacre.
Most of the victims in the attack were young, in their teens and early 20s, on their way to the U.S. for the first time in search of work. But not Edgar Lopez. Edgar Lopez was 49 and had spent half his life in Mississippi. He was returning home to his family.
His grandsons and granddaughters, he always been there for them.
As a dad, what was he like? How did he interact with you?
He was a good dad. Not a very good dad, but an awesome dad. He always been the person where he always made that phone call every single day, making sure that I'm okay, making sure that my brother's okay, or my sister. And now that he's not here anymore, it's like, you missed that phone call. It makes me feel in with anger, sadness of the way he had suffered.
Lopez died in that massacre, but the story of his death began in the U.S., with his arrest a year and a half earlier.
A federal prosecutor calling it the largest single state immigration raid in history. ICE agents surrounding food processing plants in Mississippi, arresting 680 people.
Children coming home after their first day back at school, learning one of their parents was among the hundreds detained.
We're not directing this at any particular group or anything like that. As I said earlier, if we find that employers have violated federal criminal law, we'll go after them as well.
Es muy difícil para aceptarlo, lo que pasó por él. Y no puedo creerlo también. Porque estábamos acostumbrados, pues siempre estábamos juntos. Cuando venía en la casa, no hay nadie. ¿Por qué pasó eso? No tenía que pasar así.
Were you in touch with him the day of the raid?
Sí, él estaba hablando conmigo cuando pasó eso, porque él siempre me llamaba cuando se sale en el trabajo. Y ya cuando solo él me dijo que algo está pasando aquí en la planta, que yo creo que ya entraron la migración aquí y ya solo se cortó la llamada, ya se apagó el teléfono y yo estaba llamando a él y nunca contestó. Como para mí que él ya estaba muerto, como nunca regresó.
Would you state your full name, please?
Edgar Lopez y Lopez.
We retraced what happened to Lopez following his arrest.
Mr. Lopez, what is your age?
48.
Around half of those arrested during the raids were immediately released, but not Lopez.
Do you know when Mr. Lopez was first removed from the United States?
He was removed December 1st of 1997.
And was he removed because he was illegally in the United States at that time?
Yes, sir.
Lopez had been deported 22 years earlier following a raid at a different poultry plant. By returning, he had committed a felony, re-entering the country illegally. His daughter Evelyn testified on his behalf.
I'll be responsible for everything. I'll take my dad whenever it's court date and pay for his bond.
You have any reason to believe your dad would not show up for court?
No. He will show up. He's responsible for everything.
And the judge was convinced.
This defendant, according to the evidence, has lived in this community for more than 20 years, and there's no evidence before the court that he has ever had so much as a parking ticket. The court finds that he does not present a risk of flight and therefore should be released to go home to his family.
But instead of being released, ICE transferred him to a privately owned detention facility. It's a controversial but legal practice. Because Lopez was undocumented, ICE had the final word. ICE declined to comment on Lopez's case.
That's the first time in my career I've ever seen a federal judge, order someone released and they weren't.
It's almost like ICE was insistent that these people picked up in the raids were going to be deported.
Apparently in these quote-unquote chicken raid cases, we had, it was happening a lot.
I mean, you're a lawyer, you're part of the legal system, and you're representing this man where the deck is stacked against him. What was that like to be in that legal system that you are charged with enforcing?
Well, I felt like I was on the right side of it, but I was also part of the process. And I think the whole situation was shameful. I think the whole thing was a sin.
After 3 months behind bars, Lopez pleaded guilty to re-entering the country without permission.
We are before the court on an anticipated change of plea.
Primeramente, no tengo derecho en este país, pero ante Dios sí tengo derecho porque en este país he trabajado mucho para Dios. Tengo 3 hijos aquí en Estados Unidos, tengo 3 nietos, toda la familia está aquí. Ahí está mi hija que se va a casar el 4 de diciembre. Gracias a esta gran nación. Gracias. Me encontraron trabajando, nada más trabajando simplemente en este país para salir adelante.
What I need to know is, how do you plead to the charge? Guilty or not guilty?
Culpable.
Lopez's guilty plea cleared the way for his deportation. Even the judge was powerless to stop it.
The three of us could say, we have done nothing criminally in the last 20 years. We certainly have done nothing which requires that we be removed or separated from our families for the rest of our lives. Unfortunately, Mr. Lopez, I'm not here to make the laws. I'm here to interpret the laws and follow the law as best as I can. When I have to sentence you, I appreciate the love of my country that you've shown today. And it hurts my heart to see what this great nation is doing to you at this point in time.
The judge sentenced Lopez to just 1 day in prison. ICE kept him in custody until deporting him in July of 2020, nearly 1 year after his arrest. I wanted to see the place where Edgar worked when he was picked up. So many members of the community still work in these poultry plants, despite the threat of being arrested for being undocumented. At least 230 people were also deported as a result of the raids. Not a single one of the plants was ever charged or even fined.
Yeah, it's hard for me to understand the situation, what they have done to him.
Were you in touch with him when he was in Guatemala?
Yes. At the beginning, he had told me he was not coming back because he was afraid that he will go through that same process again, get deported or be in jail for a very long time. I just told him, just take your time. But he says, no, I want to be there early. That way I don't have to wait for a long time to be with the family, to be with the kids.
After 6 months in his hometown, Lopez hired smugglers to take him back to the U.S. The alleged smugglers were part of a family long involved in local politics. The father, David Coronado, had even run for mayor.
En este momento voy a dar a conocer el plan del gobierno.
Coronado has denied working as a smuggler, but the other migrants on the trip went into debt to pay what their relatives say was Coronado's $14,000 fee. We spoke to the families to piece together the days leading up to the massacre.
Osmar es mi tercer hijo. Decidió irse para viajar allá en los Estados Unidos.
El Danilo tiene 17 años cumplidos.
Mi hija Dora Amelia López Rafael, quien perdió la vida, ya nunca podemos verla.
In the early hours of January 13th, the group set off for Mexico, crammed into 2 SUVs. They sent messages to their families along the way. We are exchanging our money. We just left. My phone credit ran out. Please add some money. The smuggler says the same number will work in Mexico.
¿Dónde están? Ahora, pues, le dije. Aquí en San Luis, dijo él. Mañana a la frontera.
The group left San Luis Potosí on January 20th, arriving 2 days later in Camargo, Tamaulipas. As U.S. and Mexican authorities have cracked down on migrants, they're taking more and more dangerous routes.
Yo le preguntaba, ¿y dónde está entonces? Estamos a un desvío de la carretera. ¿Y por qué? Decía, no, es que hay mucha mira, es por eso estamos detenidos aquí, decía él.
In Mississippi, Evelyn also received a message from her dad.
Friday morning, he had texted me at 7:30 saying that he was close by. He's like really close to Rio Grande. So I told him that we're at, what part, and he said he never answered me. That was the last message that I received from my dad.
Just hours later, police officers murdered Lopez and the other migrants, according to prosecutors. Their charred bodies were found 13 miles south of the U.S. border. Vice News obtained exclusive footage of closed hearings in the case.
Testigos lograron apreciar una persecución entre policías y civiles. Lograron apreciar también los disparos de arma de fuego que efectuaron los policías y posteriormente apreciaron el fuego de esas camionetas. Y no lo refiere solo un testigo, lo refieren 2, lo refieren 3. Se cuenta con los dictámenes químicos llevados a cabo respecto a las armas de cargo de cada uno de los imputados, obteniendo un resultado positivo, es decir, esas armas han sido disparadas.
12 police officers were charged with the massacre. 3 had been trained by the U.S. government, including the regional coordinator of the state police. She took classes on human rights and police ethics. U.S. officials maintain all the officers were vetted beforehand. The 12 cops haven't yet pleaded innocent or guilty, but they initially told prosecutors they came upon the crime scene after the massacre. A defense attorney questioned the reliability of the evidence.
Hoy en día no tenemos la certeza jurídica de quién pudo haber utilizado un arma de fuego, de quién pudo haber conducido un vehículo, de quién pudo haber estado parado observando.
And prosecutors haven't offered a motive for the massacre, only suggesting it's linked to rival cartels fighting for control. The case is ongoing.
Comparto la indignación ciudadana provocada por los hechos criminales que terminaron con la vida de 19 personas en el municipio de Camargo. Como me comprometí con los tamaulipecos, no habrá impunidad.
Just 4 months later, the governor himself was ordered arrested for alleged ties to organized crime, accusations he denies. The arrival of the victims' bodies in Guatemala was a national affair. Even the president showed up.
El gobierno de Guatemala manifiesta su rechazo absoluto ante las atrocidades cometidas en esta masacre
Neglected by their government in life, the migrants received a hero's welcome in death.
Vamos a luchar y vamos a seguir exigiendo también que haya justicia por este lamentable hecho.
Hemos visto masacre tras masacre de migrantes en México. ¿Por qué dice que ahora no va a haber seguridad?
Bueno, nosotros sabemos históricamente que han habido masacres en otros años. Aquí nosotros estamos agilizando todo lo que podemos, dar con los responsables de estos hechos y sentar un precedente distinto a lo que ha pasado en años anteriores. Gracias.
Gracias.
The raid ultimately ended in Lopez's death. He never made it back to Mississippi. In his birthplace, the entire village shared in the grief.
Llena eres de gracia, el Señor es contigo. Bendita eres entre todas las mujeres y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús. Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén.
Evelyn and her younger brother Darby flew to Guatemala for their dad's burial. It was their first time outside the country. Their mom couldn't leave the U.S. She watched the burial on Facebook Live.
El alma de nuestro hermano Edgar y el alma de todos los fieles difuntos, por la misericordia de Dios, descansen en paz. Amén.
Solo quiero agradecer a todas las familias, amigos, agradezco a todos que han conocido a mi papá. Él fue un papá excelente y que lo voy a tener conmigo siempre. No de persona, sino que así dentro de mi corazón, porque yo sé que su espíritu está aquí y lo siento, su calor. Esto no es un adiós finalmente a mi papá, sino que hasta luego a mi papá en el cielo.